Good evening, everyone. I'm going to introduce the gentleman. Phil's is a septuagenarian who was born in Portland, Maine. Phil Morse is a current resident of Saco, Maine. Phil has been a longtime member and volunteer of this
Just put it down a little bit.
of the Seashore Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport, Maine, former trustee, president, CEO, and executive director of the museum. Phil currently is the sponsor for the restoration of the 1912 Portland Lewiston Interturban. Sorry, I lost my place. Number 14, Narcissus, and administrator for the blog, now approaching 600K total page views, that features the Narcissus project at the former electric railways in Maine and Theodore Roosevelt's connection in Maine. President Roosevelt was a passenger on the Narcissus on August 18, 1914. Phil is also the independent book publisher, copyright owner, and distributor of the national awarding book, Teddy Roosevelt, Millie, and the Elegant Ride, by award-winning Maine author Jean M. Flahad. The Elegant Ride is the Narcissus. All proceeds Phil collects from sales of the books, ebooks, and audiobooks all go to benefit the Narcissus Project at the Seashore Trolley Museum. Phil's talk will highlight the history of the electric railways that served Winthrop from 1902 until 1928, and will also feature the history of the trolley park known as the Island Park, 1903 to 1959. Thank you. Phil?
Thank you, Linda. Contact information started with Connie Hansen out of Augusta. She introduced me and had the Kennebec Historical Society invite me to be a presenter. And I think that Mary, did you watch that presentation? Is that how you got connected with me through?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so yeah, thank you so much. I do these occasionally, because more so with Zoom now, just because of COVID back in the years. But I enjoy the research.
I share.
And so tonight's presentation is a little bit longer, because when Mary and I were communicating about this presentation, she asked if I might consider expanding the research part of it into Island Park, because Island Park, as a pleasure resort, extended its life beyond when the trolley organization sold it in and went out of business. They sold it in 1920, and then they went out of business in 28. But Island Park, as you know, continued existing as a pleasure park with bands and music and all that for many more years. I thought it was after World War II, sometime after World War II, but in my research I found 1959 actually was the last year. So I'll be talking a little bit about that, but we'll start off with the history of the trolley systems that served Winthrop from Augusta, and a little bit of background on that. So if you're ready to go, I'll go to the slideshow, and this is the first slide. And as you see, I have the welcome from Winthrop History and Heritage. Now, Bob, of course, is helping out, and Andy and others have helped out through the summer as I was doing research, and reached out to, to Mary. And you can see a couple of postcards there, because we're going to feature the trolleys serving Winthrop, and that's the lower postcard. And then we're going to feature Island Park on Lake Cobbassaconte. So I'm going to just go into a little background of Seashore Trolley Museum. For those of you that might not be that familiar with it, this is our 85th anniversary, and Seashore Trolley Museum is the very first electric trolley museum established in the whole world. And the first car that was collected or acquired by the young members back then, led by a 20-year-old, the car came from Saco, Maine, which is where I lived these last 12, 13 years. And it's car 31, which was built in 1900. and we acquired it in July of 1939. And so you can see it's the Museum of Mass Transit, but because we have buses as well as the trolleys and all different kinds of trolleys from all around the world. It's the largest trolley museum in the world. So it's the very first trolley museum in the world and the largest trolley museum in the world. We have about 350 acres. Not that it's all full of trolleys. Our campus is pretty big. The track, you can see on the lower pictures, the main line goes out about a mile and a half in one direction. And there's a loop out there. A couple years ago, you see the photo in the bottom right. That is Revolution Rail, and it's rail bikes. And we have a contract with them the last couple years. So you can also make reservations with them and go for a ride where you pedal up the tracks. And so the trolleys engage, so the rail bikes will go out and the trolleys will follow, or they'll follow the trolleys, and they have a great time. So attendance has been terrific. We have had brand new buildings open up this year. This is our car barn called South Boston. It replaced our original South Boston car barn, which would hold 6. It was built in the 1950s originally. That was the very first car barn or car house. And we had a donation from a member of a significant amount so we could build this brand new building. So the top picture is early this spring, before the tracks and before the overhead wire or electricity was done. But then you can see in the lower pictures that the tracks have been put into the building. And the next picture you'll see we also have a new building down in the bottom left is the building itself. And it's model railroad buildings for the Maine Central Railroad collection. And it's the largest model railroad of the Maine Central Railroad in New England. And that just opened up this year, and a major gift, over $3 million to build that building just to house and save this Maine Central Railroad system. And so now that's open. Still, the upstairs is still having some construction for this winter, but the model railroad itself, we have some special events going on with that over Christmas prelude. So we do special events. We had our Pumpkin Patch Trolley event for our 26th year this fall. We had 4,680 visitors attend this year. And we have Christmas Prelude with Kennebunkport that we participate with for many, many years. So that's the first 2 weekends in December. One of the other things that just happened recently, you'll see this slide says on November 2nd, the YouTube channel Great Documentaries released this, the image that they show is this blue trolley. And it's a documentary that actually was filmed in part at Seashore Trolley Museum in 1998, back when I was president and CEO. And it was a documentary that public television in Canada and the U.S. Released. And then they came out with a VHS tape in 1999. And then a few years later, they were able to put it into a DVD. And now they've recycled it into this. And it's a really terrific documentary. The first 20 minutes or so are about the actual history of trolleys in the country and the impact it had. Was incredible. So I would suggest it. The opening 5 trolleys that you see that they had the Seashore Trolley Museum, and many of our members were interviewed. There were 3 trolley museums in the country: Seashore Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport. And because we're the first one, we start off after the 20-minute interview or talk about how trolleys impacted the whole country, which is great information. Then it interviews us at the Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport, and then it goes to Chicago, and then it goes out to California. So this is available, just free to watch on YouTube. I do a blog post that was mentioned, that Linda mentioned in the opening. Actually created a blog post that I released tonight, so that with some details, because in the slides you're kind of restricted or limited on how much material you can put in there. And it's difficult to have like a live link, but in the blog post, I can put live links and some more descriptions about each slide so that you can click on the Narcissus 1912 blog, and the first post that's going to pop up now is going to be the Winthrop slideshow that you're seeing now, with many more details and links that you can see for more details. And you can see it features the Theodore Roosevelt Maine Heritage Trail that I released statewide a couple of years ago. Theodore Roosevelt had more than 30 connections here in Maine, different communities. Because Kennebunkport he was a passenger on the Narcissus. There's features in that book. So Kennebunkport is one of those communities, but Kennebunk is as well. And many other, as you say, 30 throughout the whole state. Centennial, I released a individual blog post on every electric railway that ever operated in Maine. And so if you want to learn more about, the trolleys that operated in Calais or, in Portland or in, Kittery, Maine, or, up in not Fort Kent, but in Presque Isle, you'll be able to find it on that. And then I feature for teachers, there's when we released the book, the Millie book, Maine Historical Society created 8 companion classroom lesson plans for grades 6, 7, and 8. They involved Theodore Roosevelt. They involve Maine's agriculture, and they involve the electric railway service in Maine. And then we also created classroom support with vocabulary and reading activities for grades 3 through 8. And so in the book that you have now for sale at the Winthrop Historical Society, the last page has links. You can access the Maine Historical Society ones through Maine History, their website, but you can go to Seashore Trolley Museum as a direct link, and you can access all those things. So the electric railways that served Winthrop for Island Park, they started opening up the line in 1902. And then they closed that part of the line in 1928. The Island Park piece we'll see later. It opened in 1903. But Island Park, as I mentioned, that their life extended to 1959, but I carried into 1960 because there was so much conversation about whether Winthrop should buy the property there as the pleasure park, or maybe Augusta should buy it. So we'll see some newspaper stories about that. But for the information, much of it that I put in these slides is from this book that you see there. It's called Trolleys to Augusta, Maine. And it's a very complicated connection. Lewiston is a very complicated connection, Lewiston, Auburn, because they're hubs. And there are so many different electric railway systems that tried to get going and did get going, and then had financial trouble, and companies took over one another company. So I, can't go into all those details in the slideshow, but you go to the blog post that shows this, and there are some links there, so you can go and see the link about Augusta and read a lot more details about the variety of services that were provided to the greater Augusta area, which included, of course, Winthrop. So I'll start off with Amos Fitzgerald. He was, as you see, it says Electric Railway King of the Pine Tree State. And the original Augusta, Hollowell, and Gardner Railroad, he was involved in putting that together. And that was the second electric railway to exist in Maine. Bangor had the first one a couple years earlier. And so Amos Fitzgerald also was involved in creating the line that went between Lewiston and Brunswick. So he was an incredible entrepreneur, business person, and there is a biography of him. Again, you go to this slide in the blog, and there's a link to his biography. And he's just an incredible individual. He lived in Fairfield, Maine, and he was involved in the very early electric company. And one of his friends lit the first house with electric lights. And so he was involved in a lot of things, but ultimately he got he helped start many electric railways in Maine. He usually would pull out financially as an investor after the first year or two or three, and refocus on starting some other ones, but anywhere all over the state. And so he was involved in looking at the Augusta, Hollowell, and Gardner, and then he had the Lewiston, Brunswick, and he wanted to connect those. And so his insight was they expanded the track from Lewiston up to Sabattis, and he was looking to extend the line from Augusta to Winthrop, and then to go from Winthrop to Sabattis. But that connection between Winthrop and Sabattis never happened directly. Eventually, another piece of track did connect Sabattis to Augusta, but it just didn't go through Winthrop. But again, Amos Fitzgerald was an influential individual in that. And so what happened for the Augusta system, as you can see, it started off with the Augusta, Hollowell, and Gardner. Then it became the Augusta, Winthrop, and Gardner Street Railway. Then in 1906, there was negotiations, and it changed, and different, actually, the financial people involved in the Bangor system took over, and they renamed it the Lewiston, Augusta, and Waterville Street Railway. Then that had financial troubles, and it became a new company, the Androscoggin and Kennebec Railway. And when that ended, that was it. But we'll go on to some of that. So here's the Augusta, Winthrop, and Gardner system. And you can see this is a map, hand-drawn map by Charles Heseltine. And he'll be mentioned quite a bit because he was an incredible Maine electric railway fan, enthusiast, researcher, did presentations. He provided so many different historical societies with the histories of the electric railways that served their places. So he hand drew these maps of every electric railway in Maine. And all those came with his friend O.R. Cummings, who was our historian for over 50 years. O.R. Cummings personally published more than 60 books just on electric railways in New England. So he and Charles, we were able to put, through a trolley museum, put their materials together in one book that you'll see here. But so the line when Amos Fitzgerald was looking to get this thing going, they finally started construction in 1902, as you can see. So it opened up from State Street to Western Ave in July 1902. They started, opened that piece up. And then they went a little bit further over to East Winthrop to Dudley Square. In 1902, they were able to complete it all the way to Winthrop. So it took, throughout 1992, it was like 3 major phases. And when it came into Winthrop Village, and we'll see a more close-up of Winthrop Village and the track, there's what's called a loop that came down Summer Street, Bowdoin Street, and went Main Street. So there's a loop there. And in 1906, from the Main Street, Bowdoin Street, they did an extension to the Maine Central Railroad Station in 1906. And we'll see more details about that. But you can see these different connections. So here is, in that book I mentioned that O.R. Cummings and Charles Heseltine supplied the materials, but the Seashore Trolley Museum published the book. There's a soft cover and there's a hard cover. Limited editions, I don't know. I think the museum is sold out, but you can find them online. And so that was released 9-10 years ago. And you can see the details that are in those books. So here, just for the Winthrop line, you can see where each of the stops were. So it started at State and Grove Street for the Augusta waiting room. And then there was, we'll see some pictures, but then you can see there's Plunkett's Turnout and then Granite Hill Turnout. And a turnout is where the track, there's a mainline track and then like a side track. And so the trolley could pull over so that if traffic was heavy on that particular day, the trolley could pull over and pick up or discharge passengers while another car went by. So you'll see turnouts here and there. So there's that whole, 14 and a half miles to the loop from the spot. And so much of that land, some of it went along the side of the road, but the majority of it between Winthrop and Augusta was along private right of way. So it's basically in the woods or along the lake. So here's where it started on State Street. And there you can see that waiting station. This is a crisp, beautiful photo. And so there was a lot of traffic in that area. And you can see I put little notation in there. It says during February of 1898, that building was wired for electric lights and electric heat with current. So the 600 volts of DC, not AC current, but DC current that the trolleys ran on, also supplied the electricity, the lights, and the heat for the waiting station. And we have a small waiting station at the Trolley Museum that is where a stop is for when you're a passenger or on the visitor at the museum. And it's a building that was waiting station in West Cumberland, Maine, for the Portland, Lewiston Interurban. So the Narcissus, which we are restoring, occasionally would stop and pick up or discharge people in the small building. So here's the Augusta Waterville and numbers, Gardner numbers. So you can see initially it picked up in 1902. And it says it was the opinion of many of the Winthrop route would not generate enough revenues to cover costs. One comment was, if there were 2 round trips a day, perhaps 10 people might be induced to travel to Augusta. So a lot of people thought that an hourly headway was established with a through fare of 25 cents. So you could pay 25 cents to go the whole thing. Generally, they'd have these fare stops, and it might be a nickel a play, but to do the whole route one way is 25 cents initially. Because the settlements along the route were small, patronage was initially small, but the Granite Hill Quarry, because so many people worked there and it was such a nice business for the local area, a lot of people used the trolleys to go to work there. And later on, some freight was handled that way too. So one of the things that trolley companies would do to generate business is they would establish these trolley parks. And in Augusta, they had 2 early ones, but they were right along Augusta. And they built one of them just outside of the longest, the last fare route, so they could get an extra nickel to go that extra, half a mile or whatever, where they built the park. But then they came up with this idea for Winthrop to build, to take on Island Park. And that is a further distance from Augusta than just being down the street on, say, State Street. Or to go to Togus, just across the river. So by having to go a few extra miles, they can generate more revenue by having a trolley park with a destination that people can have it be such a fun park that a lot of people want to go. And so that's what trolley companies did all over the place. And so in Old Orchard Beach, because that was a big spot, but in different communities, they would have these pleasure parks. And some of them got to be really big, like Riverton Park in Portland. When it first opened, they had 10,000 people show up. So anyway. So they opened that up, Island Park, in 1903, and it really did stimulate business. And they bought these large what they call open cars. They call them breezers because no air conditioning back then, the early 1900s. So these open cars they would have different number of seats. So this is what they call a 15 bench open. Each bench would hold approximately 5 people. Of course, if you had young kids, you could hold a lot more people. You will see pictures in major, like in New Haven, Connecticut, when it was the Yale Bowl, there might be 200 people. They would be on the rooftop. They would be standing on the side. I mean, they would just be full of people. So they could carry a lot of people. And so you can see that would be an enjoyable ride if you had an open car in those early 1900s going to Island Park, going to Lake Cobbessconty, and going to Maranacook, or just going to Winthrop from Augusta. The view going along the lakes and crossing the rivers and stuff is just going through the woods. I mean, it's just beautiful. And you can see what the pay was. So here's the Maranacook. And originally, it was called a combination car. So you can see in this picture that there's this, let's see if I can turn on the red thing here. Where is that? Turn on the pen. Is that? Yeah. And then passengers would be where the passenger windows are. And so that served two purposes. And so from a financial standpoint, that helped, especially early years when they didn't think necessarily they were going to generate a lot of passenger service from the Winthrop line. They wanted to try to start working in some freight service. And this was one of the first cars. And so you can see a picture of an interior of a combination car that we have at Seashore Trolley Museum that actually is from Presque Isle. And it's the same period, 6 years later, I think, but the interior is very similar. And then the Cobbessconty is the same size. It was built the same year in Laconia, just like the Maranacook. So it would hold 48 passengers. And it's a beautiful interior. Again, we have another car, the second car we acquired, and it came to the Trolley Museum in 1940 as a complete operating car from Manchester, New Hampshire, that was built in Laconia in 1906. And you can see the interior, and the interior would be, because of the same company, same type of car, what they call an interurban. There's different roofs sometimes. So the one that's on the Cobbessconty is called a railroad roof. So there was freight that became an important part. They had contracts to deliver and pick up U.S. mail. And that went right until the Androscoggin and Kennebec went out in late revenue, an important revenue part in addition to passenger service. So the Winthrop line had several of these waiting stations. They seem to have had, from the photos that I've been able to find, some similarities in their look. Other communities, they might all look different, but these, you can see Granite Hill, Hammond Grove, Underhill, Winthrop Center, Dudley's. And then, of course, they had Island Park when it opened in 1903, 1,200 people a day during the height of the season. And you'll see some newspaper articles later on that you'll be able to take a look at based on the Winthrop Historical Society's YouTube channel. You'll be able to pause and read the newspaper. Or I put the date and which newspaper each clipping is from, or each article is from, so you could go online and find the newspaper yourself and read it too. So this is the East Winthrop substation, which also acted as a waiting station. And I found this postcard with this fella on it. And what I believe, he's standing on this wooden walkway, which I believe, if you look on the photo on the right, is this wooden, basically facing toward the East Winthrop substation. Now, it's inside, along with a place to wait, sit and wait, probably even buy tickets. They generated power. Now, this particular substation was like a backup. So if there was a problem with supplying electricity by some other means, they could kick this into play and help supply power. So it had a big. And here's one Winthrop Center waiting station. And this is a hand-drawn map by Charles Heseltine that's in that Trolley companies in Maine. And he's just incredibly skilled at doing this. If you're familiar with that, probably the landscape's a little different today.
Mhm.
So then as it came around the corner to go along Lake Cook, you see Bierce's Landing, and you can see the track, and this is a turnout right here. And so a trolley could pull over here or come in the opposite direction. And I believe this postcard, that corner, that might be where the turnout is. So Bryce's might be right up here, and the lake is over here off the left. And there's just even though it's the same stop, I like the picture widened out. You see as they're stopping and going along the river, the lake. So you think about how, long, was it probably to a couple miles where the track goes right along. To be in an open car to do that, with your family, or if you're dating, would be an incredible experience. So I plug in because we have at the Trolley Museum 15 bench open cars. Are you familiar with that postcard up in the top left? Because this is one that's a popular postcard, and it says approach to Winthrop. And if you're on the track and you're going toward where the trolley is, then that is going to Winthrop. But the trolley car is actually heading away from Winthrop. But so
What did he get wrong?
you can see
Unless it's
people
backwards.
having a good time at Seashore Trolley Museum. That's a picture. That's a picture I took. Well, it could be, I suppose, but and this might be that same corner, in a different postcard.
Oh, no.
But maybe the trolley is going from here around this corner,
The postcard.
and the photograph is taken from. Trying to think about that when you find these things. I like doing that. And so here's another one, and now you have a close-up of the loop and the approach. So this is Upper Dam Bridge, and the trolleys approaching Winthrop would come in Bowden Street, and initially up until 1906, they would then go around to Main Street and around this loop. And then Summer Street, and then back out this way. Then in 1906, they extend the line from Main Street and Bowden down Main Street, past the high school, and to the station for the Maine Central Railroad. And then a little bit at the end for the Barley and Sons business, because the freight service.
Bailey. Look at you.
So these postcards that I have show, so this has to be after 1906, because prior to 1906, they didn't extend down Main Street toward Maine Central Railroad Station. They just went in this loop. So they'd come and turn onto Main Street.
That's not Main Street. Yeah, I see. Oh.
And they'd come right around the house. And
Historical Society.
yeah. And again, this has to be Main Street because it can either go there. So I had a question here. Can you see where your building is now, where you're sitting right now? Is that is that visible in this picture?
I think
on Main
it's right
Street?
up above street. Do you know what's on that sign?
The next one down, Mary.
No, it's this
Okay.
here. And this one might be it.
Yeah.
But can you read that
No.
sign? I
No,
can't
I think
either.
the first building-
But what this sign is right here?
No,
I
up
don't.
above, there's a black
Yeah.
sign sticking out.
I with the slideshow, I can't zoom in on it, but
No, that would help.
yeah, this one right here, I think. Is
Yeah.
that the one you mean right here?
Yeah.
And so taking the higher res, and I'd be happy to share these with you. So
That'd be great.
so I have 3 or 4 of Main Street and this one here I identify it as the Trolley. We're looking west, and that the south side of Main Street is on the left side. And the Trolley that you see in the picture is actually heading toward us as we're looking at it, heading east. And and the building with the red and white awning, Union Street right there. So that trolley would come and turn up Union Street. That's the way I identify
That's
this
right.
picture.
That's exactly right.
And this is a similar picture, but I think in the opposite direction.
Well, this is
And so
this is
I
the
say
house.
this is that car.
It's going to go around the corner. Could go around the corner. I don't know what's the front and what's the back. But this is the
Yeah.
Penniman building.
So I say here it's heading east on Main Street and is about to turn north.
Yep.
Onto Union.
Yep.
Okay. And this is similar, but it's different, but it's the same kind of thing. Now this one, these postcards, they just say there's no postmarks or anything. It's just in pencil. Somebody said, it looks like about 1910, but they did that. And so what I did was I went on Google to see if I could locate that. And this is what I found this is from Google Maps. This is 123 Main Street, which across the street from this is where Union Street is. And so the picture below, there's Union Street, there's Main Street, and this building down in the lower left, these are still there. They're right here. And what's inside this one downstairs is the butterflies on it.
Well,
I believe. I mean, it's just me figuring out 130 Main Street. But I like trying to piece those things together. I like that.
me too.
So here's the Marana Cook. And when the Lewiston Augusta line took over the Winthrop line, they changed the numbers of these cars. So this car is 108, but it's the same car because you can see the doorway here on it. So it's an early picture. So it probably is, it says it's postmarked 19th, took over this, the Winthrop line in late 06, early 07. They actually converted this car from being a combination car and carrying freight to carrying all passengers. So they did that in the first couple of years. And so They changed the number to 108, but this is originally Miranda Cook number 19. And you can see it's still the combination car, so it's an early picture. And I did this picture below. The library is right across the street. That building that's in the picture and the postcard above is still there. So I like that. And then we're starting to work our way toward the Maine Central Railroad. And again, this postcard clearly shows the tracks, the overhead wire. For many electric railways, the way they supply the wire to feed the electricity to the trolley cars, a trolley pole, they would call them a line pole. It'd have a metal arm that sticks out, and that would hold up over the road, over the tracks, that a connection that would hold the wire up. But when you have a big open corner like this, you can't do that with poles. So what they do is, you can see they spread the wire and hang it out there and put tension on it from the poles so that you can supply the electricity going toward back then the high school and Maine Central Railroad, or you can have it go around the corner to Main Street, further down to Main Street. So now you see on the map on the right where the line was extended from Bowdoin and Maine down past, excuse me, drink of water. So this is another postcard, that set I got that says circa 1910. And Mary was able to, you guys were able to help me out with the location of that. And that's cool. Here's a couple more old postcards. Here's the old Winthrop High School, because the trolley would go right left. A portion of the high school is in there. The church is still there, I guess, right? Is that right?
It is.
Is the church still located there on Main Street?
Yes, the church is still there, and like you said, I can't.
But the high school, it says, is no longer there.
I gotta go up there and put. What's our thing?
It is no more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's down. There's a gas station there now.
Yeah, that was the old school, wasn't it?
Yeah, one of them.
So now we're going down to the end of the line, and so as I mentioned originally, it would stop right there at the station book that I show here. And so where the people are waiting for the car and the tracks are, it's actually the opposite side of the station from where the trolleys would stop. So the trolleys are actually behind this building. That's where their track was, which is where this track is here. And then they extended that track for freight services to help with the M. Bailey and Sons. So in looking at this photo, this would be one of those M. Bailey and Son buildings back there. So then on the left is in the area around 1915 on Western Avenue, inbound from Winthrop, is number 108, which is, it's still got the doorway for freight, but it had been converted to carry just passengers, so it would seat 48 passengers. And it was so the Cobbassaconte, that number was changed from number 20 to number 110. And from 1907 to 1917, those were pretty good years. Waterville line, freight and express services too. You can see they carried 15.5 million passengers. Them carried that many. And those were peak years for electric railways in Maine. So throughout Maine in 1915, there were about 90 communities in Maine that had electric railway or trolley service. And it was about 520 miles of track throughout the state. And in that one year,
they carried more than 57 million passengers just here in Maine, and the total population of Maine was only about 775,000. So it really was, in those early years, that the 20-year period, made for Maine and all across the country, and that uh, that documentary that I mentioned, that first 20 minutes really does a great job of talking about the impact that trolleys had throughout the country, in those years. But after 1915 or so, when World War I kicked in, things became a lot more challenging. So this postcard is of the parlor car merry meeting, and parlor cars were elaborate cars. And you can see that this one, people would pay an extra, like $10, use the car for half a day or a day to go to, special events, so a wedding or, a reunion or any kind of, parties like that. And so I don't have so many of those cars in different electric railways. They would always have a parlor car in their system that they could rent out for more money like that. And it was common to have the kind of interior that you see in the picture on the right. Sometimes they'd have card tables and things like that. Excuse me. So then the last month of 1917, first few months of 1918, there was trouble. And it wasn't just trouble for the local line. It was trouble with all the electric railways around the country. World War I, the scarcity of parts, winters were really difficult. Maintaining maintenance on the lines, the overhead, finding help. I mean, it was just tough times. And the Androscoggin and Kennebec Railway was incorporated later in 1918 because the Lewiston, Auburn, and Waterville, Lewiston, Augusta, and Waterville line basically went bankrupt. And so it was reestablished as the Androscoggin and Kennebec Railway, and did okay for a little bit. But in 1922, the passenger count trended downward, down to basically half of what it was in 1915, 7,863,000. And the Winthrop line was abandoned in August of 1928. So then, because Depression hit in 29, numbers dwindled even more. You can see it's down to less than 5 million passengers. And then when Maine Department of Transportation planned to improve Route 201, this triggered the end because the tracks would have to be literally moved. And the cost to do that, they just wasn't going to happen. So they went bankrupt and went out of business. And July 31st, 32 was the end of it for the service. Now, I mentioned early on that the body of the Maranacook, it was a common practice, especially during the Depression. If a company, trolley company, was upgrading cars, getting newer cars, they'd try to sell the old cars to a different trolley company. Sometimes they could do that. So, like, there is one Maine trolley that's still in existence today that was part of the fleet in Bangor. And when Bangor was upgrading or downgrading, looking toward buses or looking to upgrade cars, they sold a bunch of cars to an electric railway company down in Pennsylvania. And they maintained those Bangor cars for many years. But when they ultimately went out of business, they sold one of those cars, and ultimately it went into a trolley museum, and that trolley museum restored it. And it's operating today, just like Seashore Trolley Museum operates cars from different parts of the country and around the world that they've been able to acquire. So it's not restored as a Bangor, Maine trolley. It's restored as a Pennsylvania trolley because it operated down there for many years. But the history is, it is a restored, originally Maine car. And we have 10 Maine trolleys at Seashore Trolley Museum. They're not all restored. Some of them are, but the restoration, like so many things, requires time and money. And so this is one of the other things that would happen to trolleys. Sometimes they couldn't sell the whole car, so they would scrap out the metal and then sell the body. So the Marana Cook was that restaurant for a while in Hollowell, and then went to Augusta. And you might recall the Maine Cabin Masters in March of 23 released a program called Trolley Good Family Camps. And one of the camps by Island Park, the base of it is made from the frame of one of the trolley cars that used to service Island Park and Winthrop. And so if you watch that video, they show, they film underneath, and you can see in some cases, the whole body might have been saved, and that might have been the camp. That's what the Narcissus was. The Narcissus was saved because it was a diner for a while. Then it didn't work out so well, so the guy sold the body for $100 to a fella who had it be his camp, his family camp at Sabattis Lake for 25 or 30 years. They lived there. And then we built him a house, and he gave us the body of the Narcissus, which we're restoring now. So you can see in this screenshot that I have of the frame, that's what you would see underneath that camp that's in by Island Park, where that red circle is, and the arrow, that's where that is. And so that's a cool thing. And for them to learn more about this, they sent a representative from the Maine Cabin Masters to the Trolley Museum, and she actually operated a trolley and saw our different trolleys, and so that was a cool thing. So that really sums up the life of the trolley system that serviced Winthrop from Augusta with these slides and information. And like I say, there's more details you can go to on the blog post for any one of those slides. But if you have questions, the next phase, the next segment of this slideshow is going to be focused on Island Park and its beginning. And Trolley serviced it, but is going to talk about the park itself. So, Mary, would you like me to take questions now about, if anybody has any about trolleys, or do you want me just to go right into the Island Park slides?
What do you think? It's 5 minutes to 7. Does anybody want to ask questions? Does anybody want to leave, or do you want to keep going until he's done? Okay.
I thought this went till 7.
Yes, it does, but
Okay.
we got more.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hopefully the recording will be on YouTube. Did you have any? Who? You can say it. Go ahead.
Between Augusta and Winthrop.
Did they have any accidents with the trolleys?
Oh yeah, there were accidents, sure, and I mean, but that's that's yeah, yeah, because especially as maintenance was not maintained because different things. So that's one of the major causes of most of the more rural systems, because in Maine you would have those seasonal changes where frost heaves. I mean, think of your asphalt roads and how different it is when you're transitioning from winter to spring, and what happens to the roads, the potholes and all that stuff. Well, that same thing would happen with tracks, and the poles hold the overhead wire for some of the places. So those first few years when they first built the track, they could make money because they, especially if they built a trolley park, they could generate a lot of revenue. They could make money. But then when they had to start doing maintenance, and as the transportation department, Maine Railroad, got more involved in safety issues because of accidents, they might force the company, and the company, the only money that came to them was from their freight service or mail service or passenger service. They weren't getting financial help from the states or the government or locally. So if they didn't make money, they were in trouble. So one of the things they would do is they would cut back on the maintenance. And then, of course, that would position them for, perhaps accidents. And if as accidents happen in other areas, then the Railroad Commission would get involved saying, okay, to avoid accidents like we've had in another electric railway system, we're going to have you change this particular intersection or this particular curve or this particular ratio of elevation or something, or the bridge, or I mean, and of course, the ones who had to pay for that was the company. And so making money was really challenging, especially for the more rural systems. Portland system was massive, and you had the city aspects of it, so they stayed pretty financially strong for many, many years, and as did other communities. The Benefit-Saco community was pretty financially strong for a number of years, as were some others. But the ones that were more rural really took a beating, and so accidents especially happened. Yeah. And of course, when automobiles started coming into play, because some of the electric railway systems would have snow plows, and so they would keep, in a snowstorm, they might be able to do a little better job of keeping the track cleared. If it's a major storm, no, they might be not able to operate for several days until the tracks were all cleared. But if it wasn't major, they had snow plows or things that could maintain a clearance. And so what some of the automobiles would do, and even horse-drawn wagons, is they would cut through the snowbank onto the tracks because they could actually operate better on that open track than trying to get through a snowy road. And so sometimes there were accidents because of that. So yes, there were accidents. Yeah.
How fast did the trolleys?
When they, generally speaking, not in town, of course, but approaching, they might be 18 to 22 miles an hour was a pretty common time. But of course, as they're approaching a stop, they would slow down. But if they had a fairly, nice space where they could operate, you might even be able to go a little bit faster than that. In some cases where they had long spaces between towns, like the interurban between Lewiston and Portland, they were, for the initial, they only had 7 stops for 35 miles. And so those cars were clocked at over 70 miles an hour. But at times, for normal schedule, they would travel at 60 miles an hour for, between stops. But for the more local stuff, if you got into the, 20 to 25 miles an hour, that was pretty fast.
The chat, Scott, I moved away in 1979 and have not been back until about 14 years. I'm just curious, is the East Winthrop substation still standing? And Barb says the substation on Old Village was torn down a few years ago. The roof had rotted and it was too difficult to maintain.
Yeah.
Scott says, thank you.
Yeah.
That was a sad.
That always.
Yeah. There's a picture of it there in the corner if anybody wants to look at it.
Yeah, and for me, because I do research on so many different electric railway systems, and over the years have gone in some areas and travel, like especially the Portland, Lewiston interurban, I would go to those communities, and connect with the local historical society, maybe do a walking tour and see some of these things, and then see some of those things that are still in existence, but then housing development or road expansion or something causes it to have to be removed. It's always sad for me. But
Is there any more questions? The rest of this presentation is on Island Park itself. It will be available. Well, we won't be able to put it on YouTube, will we? Because we won't be able to. Maybe we should record it while you're here. And if anybody wants to leave, you're welcome. Because it is 7:00.
yeah.
It'll still be on YouTube, right?
Not if we don't record it.
Oh, if we continue.
So if we,
How long the program is it?
how much longer do you think it will be, Phil?
Well, there's like 23 or 4 slides, but because so much of it is newspaper, I'm not going to read through it, and I don't know the details like I might know the trolley details, so I can go through it. I can go through it fairly quickly.
Okay.
Pause long enough so the recording is going to get it, so people can pause on the YouTube recording. If somebody sees something, we can wait for a minute so you can read it. I mean, I'm open to doing it however you feel you'd like it done. Because each newspaper article, I have the name of the newspaper and the date it was issued, so that once you have that screenshot, you can find the article yourself, in online. So again, I kind of think of myself sometimes as an electrical strip outlet. That you plug one into an outlet, and then you have access to 4 or 5 or 6, a strip of 4 or 5, 6 outlets. So I'm not the source, just like the strip outlet. You plug it in to get the electrical source, and I'm not the finished user, although occasionally I am. I provide resources or connections to resources for people, and that's how I'm feeling about. All right, so I've mixed in some postcards of Island Park along with newspaper articles I did for research. And as I mentioned early on, I was surprised because I'd read in O.R. Cummings books that Island Park lasted just beyond World War II, but the reality is it lasted until 1959. So here we go. This is the Island Park piece. And it says, in an effort to stimulate summer business, the amusement park was built. And the word amusement park was used, but it really wasn't an amusement park like we might think of an amusement park today. It was really a more natural setting to relax and just enjoy the environment and the lake and, canoe or swim or, the band. It was really something. So the journey from Augusta was described as the prettiest ride out of Augusta. The park outlasted the trolley era until I put 1960. So you can see how they were going for construction. So again, this is June 27th, but it's the July 1st, 03 Kennebec Journal, a lengthy article, the fair proposition of our beautiful lake. And it goes into a lot of detail about what was served and what things they had and the people. It says on Friday afternoon, the first really beautiful day of the season, Mr. William Reed, with his proverbial hospitality, had the pleasure of filling his elegant Nefima launch with a happy company. So you had boats that would, commercial, locally commercial boats that would take people on rides and stuff too. But you'll see there are a lot of groups, whether it be church groups, school groups, other community groups that utilize this for their group settings. So the pavilion on the left, on the right is the theater. So the pavilion is up here. That was built a little bit later. So this postcard is marked August 1908. And this is the theater. And this theater was a popular venue as well as the pavilion with the dances and the bands. And so these newspaper articles are all 1903, which was the construction piece of that. Again, this is still 1903 because there were a lot of, clippings and newspaper articles because it was a big deal. And so here's Mr. and Mrs. Ward will give a trolley ride this evening to a party of invited friends. The party will be a trip to Island Park. And Methodist and Congregational Sunday schools, will unite for an annual Sunday school picnic in a few weeks. So, band concerts. So that's what they did. That was the major part of it. So here it's the popular excursion of Monmouth people and visitors this year is to Augusta via Winthrop, Hammond's Grove, on to Togus, because Togus also was an entertainment center. And every week parties going, many take shore dinners at Hotel Pines, Island Park. So there's an ad about Hotel Pines. So transit rate, $2 per day back then. band concerts. It shows what songs they were playing, and
That's why we're going to play Moonlight Bay.
yeah, that's coming up. That's coming up. So for the season, the vacation season, they had a lot more trolley rides per hour that would go out to Island Park because, as it mentioned, wasn't uncommon to have 1,000, 1,200 people in a day. And so, because things were upgraded over the years, the pavilion was upgraded because they had a fire here and there. They changed management, changed ownership. So this is 1911. So this is when Mr. Gray bought Island Park from the Trolley Company in 1920. And he was already a major theater owner near Augusta and by Lewiston. And then when he died, his estate sold it in 1928. So there were a lot of other articles, during those years about it being focused on theatrical stuff, as well as the bands. But here's the Moonlight Bay, and I took this information as reprinted, like I say, from the Lake Association newsletter from 2018. So this is 1929. So now you're looking at, of course, the Depression hitting that fall.
Whoops.
And there was a major, a guy was messing around, and it turned into a really bad situation for a lot of people. I like this postcard. It's just, again, they've upgraded the bridge contact there. And one of the things that's funny, I shouldn't say funny, but some of these postcards say that, that Island Park is in Augusta. You've probably heard that before, probably. And so that was a common marketing ploy for Augusta is to market it as being, so you'd go to Augusta so you could get over there. And again, some of the ads and things. So you can see 1938, 37, 38. It says hearing will be held in Town Hall, 7 o'clock, for a malt liquor license for Island Park. And they had to renew that license every single year, and it was through a public town hall meeting in Winthrop.
Oh,
and this was a nice article. And Island Park was pasture when pioneer boatmen tented nearby. So I like these articles because, again, this is 1941, and they're looking back, 50 years prior to Island Park being developed into the trolley park, and what was it like. And so there are some articles that do that reflection of prior to it becoming a trolley park, and then you'll see also reflecting once the Island Park closed for good, reflecting at some of the nice things that went on. So here's Rudy Valley.
Where's Rudy Valley?
You guys know. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's a Mainer. He's a Mainer.
He's a minor.
Yeah. And you can see all the advertisements. These are all Island Park advertisements, all this. And so, again, for me, if I were looking into it, from a historical society standpoint, I'd want to identify these, see if the connections are still there, if his family members still there that are connected with it some way or another. I like that kind of stuff. Again, advertisements, especially for bands. This Lenny Lizotte became very common through the 40s. And I mentioned this to Mary, this poster.
Got one over
Um,
there. Too, guys.
Yeah, it says Tuesday, June 13th, but it doesn't say what year. And so I didn't spend a lot of time looking, but I did search for Cliff Evans and his sensational Victor recording orchestra, but I didn't have any luck finding out about him. But I did look to see when Tuesday, June 13 happened, what years, and it's 1905, 11, 16, 22, 30. So those were all years that the park was in existence. You look at that poster and you wonder, from based on, how they're dressed, maybe that would lead you to what year it might be or what decade it might be. Because these are all, World War II years.
You know anybody there?
Mary, does he know we have the check?
The who'sy?
The check.
Oh, I don't know. Phil, we have a coat check that someone donated to the society, and it's got the little hangers that you put the circles on. We don't know what circles are, but we.
I like all that stuff. I mean, my attic's full of stuff like that. I like that. I know in the early days, my boys might consider me a hoarder, but I tell them I'm an archivist. So the malt liquor licenses, you can see there was an issue in '54, and Island Park's license was suspended for a little while because they served minors, I guess.
Was that you?
You're a minor.
So here in 1955, this is one they're starting to look back a little bit, having some reflection pieces on it. Because now at this point, it's been around for 55 years, right? Because it opened in 1903. So these are advertisements. Again, different orchestra, Al Corey this time. 59. And so when it says in this advertisement, dancing, last dance tonight, and it's the left one is May 16th. So that was starting the season off, but September 12th was actually the last, because 59, it didn't reopen after September 12th of 59. So they had the grand opening tonight back in May 16th, 59, and then they had the last night. So then in 1960, that's when Winthrop, started talking about, should we buy it? And Augusta had talks about whether they should buy it or not. And there was talks about it becoming a marina. And so here's, again, some flashbacks, reflection pieces. This article in particular is June 29th, 1960. But none of this stuff happened. So it didn't become arena.
Oh, customers bought it.
So then I do this little aerial view, just to how the island looks from above. And I didn't change that. It's not 20. It's not 20,000 to 204. It's 2024.
Change it, but it stick, I guess.
Yeah, I meant to, but I just got sidetracked. So that was the end of it. So this is just wrapping things up at the Trolley Museum. If you've never been down, or if you have been down, we have a lot of events through the operating season. The Pumpkin Patch event, I actually created that. This was our 26th year. And as I mentioned, we had 4,680 people attend it this year, which is a record. The Christmas Prelude event, I actually brought that back in 2003. And it's become really, really popular again. So, and there's our first car up in the top right-hand corner, car 31. That's the very first. That's the mother trolley of all trolley museums in the whole world. and it was built in 1900 in Philadelphia, and operated here in Saco, where I live, from 1900 until 1939, when our early founders saved the car. And then this is the last slide. So you've seen the book, the Teddy Roosevelt Millie and the Elegant Ride. All the proceeds go toward the Narcissus Project. The education piece for homeschoolers, for classroom teachers. It's a great resource. And if teachers reach out to me, I'll do classroom visit. I'll do correspondence with the kids. I'll share different things. I've been a substitute teacher for 25 years, literally. And so I'm working for grades 3, 4, and 5 the last couple of years, because I literally walk across the street from where I live to go to school. Mm-hmm. And so that's it. That's the last slide. So I'm done. How long did that take? I was kind of slow-mo on it, but
20 after.
Okay. So yeah, so I was thinking it was 15 to 20 minutes. So
yep.
So any questions? I mean, you recorded this, so I think there's some information there that might be useful or helpful or interesting for folks when it's on YouTube.
I don't have a question, but I have some comments, and I enjoyed this very much. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of this, so I hope that the whole thing will be available, although I know that the part on Island Park was not recorded. Anyway, as I noted in the comments, I grew up in East Winthrop. I moved from Winthrop, Narrows Pond Road, to East Winthrop in 1963 when I was in 3rd grade. And sometime in the late 60s, I remember my friends and I decided to explore Island Park. So we went down, this was in the summer, and we went down to the Island Park area, and we crossed over the bridge, an old wooden plank bridge. I remember it was quite scary because the wood didn't seem to have much integrity. There was what we all thought was a dancing pavilion. And we peered through the windows, and there were a lot of overgrown, I would guess, blackberry bushes. But we could see well into it, and there was a dirt floor. But boy, that building had deteriorated rapidly. Now that I know that it was still in use in 1959, so I'd say in a decade, that pavilion building really went downhill quite quickly. Wow. I'll also note that my mother's still alive, she's 96, and she lives in Gardner, had a date there before they were married in the early part of the 1950s. So I have some connections there, and I'm not really sharing much that's of value, except that the building, as I said, Dancing Pavilion, I believe, had deteriorated rapidly by the late 1960s, within a decade. Wow. But this is very interesting. Now, thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Have you? I like to do like interviews, like oral history, interviews with individuals. So your mom might be someone that would be able to provide some up close and personal accounting of being at Island Park. That would be a cool thing if you were open to that, or if she were open to that, having that conversation.
I'll reach out to my older brother who lives with her, and
yeah.
And if he does, I will have them contact the Winthrop Historical Society.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I mean, many of the facts in the Teddy Roosevelt book were from an interview that one of the Trolley Museum volunteers who he worked for WBZ in Boston for 42 years, and he was a videographer. And so he would borrow the WBZ equipment and bring it up to Kennebunkport to the Trolley Museum, and he would interview the early founders. And other early members and catalog all that stuff and do commercials and record commercials, and so I set some things up at some retirement homes, nursing homes, with some individuals. And one woman that we interviewed in her home, she was in her 90s in Elliott, Maine, and she was 10 years old in 1918. She was 10 years old. So she was born in 1908. And so we have a 90-minute interview of her telling what her life was like growing up in Elliott when the Trolleys and her father and brothers, and they had a farm and all the life that her life was. And because at the time I didn't know that I might be doing this book in the future, but once that idea about the book came into play and meeting with Gene, talking about what we might do and what we might add, I said, well, now that I think of it, I have this interview of this woman who was 10 years old in 1918 talking about what her life was like in a rural area in Maine in 1918. And we used a number of her stories because her father was a Theodore Roosevelt icon not friend, but I mean, and so you just never know. But to capture those moments, I mean, for the Narcissus, for this book, we interviewed 3 women in Gray, Maine, at the Historical Society. Working with them, and one was 96 years old, one was 98 years old, one was 100 years old, and they all grew up in Gray and rode these interurbans when they were youngsters. And so the stories that came about what their life was like and how challenging it was in a rural farm life, and I mean, it's just so I always try to encourage people, to get some information like that because it's cool stuff for me.
Bill, do you know why it's called the Narcissus? Do we have to read the book?
I do. So W. Scott Libby was a very successful businessman in the Lewiston area. So you might be familiar with a lot of the mills in Lewiston and the Libby Dingley mills. And one of the mills that he bought early on had the water rights to the Androscoggin. And with those water rights, he built a dam because he had bought one of the very early electric companies, or actually 2 of them, and then joined them together. And so then by building a dam, he could generate electricity. And in the very early days of electric companies, revenue-wise, they were really limited on where they could generate revenue. The 3 major sources were, one, if you could contract with a town or a city to provide the electricity to eliminate the street lights on Main Street, have them become electric street lights. Another one was in a mill city. You could start providing electricity to generate electricity to power some of the equipment in there, whether it be AC electricity or DC electricity. But the single biggest revenue generator was if you could get a contract with an electric streetcar company and supply the electricity for them. So Mr. Libby was such an incredible businessman. So he had the mills. He had the electric companies, very early electric companies. Now he had dams generating electricity. And there was no major electric railway line connecting those 2 major cities in Maine at the time of the Auburn-Lewiston area with Portland. You could get there by trolley, but you'd have to go up along the coast, Falmouth, and up that way, up to Brunswick, and then over to Auburn, and then, up that way. So it would be like 3.5 hours. You'd have to change trolleys 2 or 3 or 4 times, where, it was much closer. So he got permission, he got the money to build the direct line. So he wanted to have cars that really stood out with names similar to Marana Cook. He wanted top of the line cars. And he had them 4 of them built in Laconia, just like the Cavalcanti and the Marana Cook. And he wanted them to have names so that passengers and employees would get emotionally connected with each individual car, not just to a number, but, oh, look, here comes and so he initially was thinking of naming them after biblical individuals. But some of those names are very long and complicated. So he was an outdoorsman with his family. They hunted, they camped, fished, all that stuff. So his two daughters suggested to him that he name the cars after his favorite flowers. So the original six cars are all named after flowers: the arbutus, the clematis, the narcissus, the gladiolus, the azalea. So then in 1920, Maine Centennial, they ordered one more interurban, but because it was Maine Centennial, they named it Maine and not after a flower. But yeah, there's stories. That's one of the things that attracts me to the Trolley Museum. Every car, everything there has multiple stories for its lifetime, and so it's just keeps me entertained.
We have another question.
Okay.
So this is not a main trolley question, but it is a question for your trolley museum. Do you still have the Aurora, Joliet, and Elgin trolley car in your collection?
So from the Elgin,
Yeah, AJ and
It's the
E,
EJ.
or EJ and E, or EJ.
So is that from the Chicago area?
Yes.
Yes, we do. I think it's number 420, or because we have several from the North Shore area that would go to Milwaukee or serve. Yeah. So yes, we do.
Oh, good. Yay.
There you go, field trip.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You can go online to the museum's website, and on their homepage, if you just type in www.trolleymuseum.org, on their homepage, you just slide down, and it has a link there that you can search their collection, and you can put it in by the name of the the railway, or if you happen to know the number of the car, you can put it in there, and then up will pop the history of that particular car with a photo of it.
There you go, Jen. Cool.
Okay, cool.
Well, thank you so much, Phil.
All right, thank you.
We'll make another round of applause.
So let me know when you have it. I know Bob's going to take a little while to do some editing, but I appreciate his time doing that. But once you have it posted, send me the link, and I'll put it into the blog and help promote it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all that research, too. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have any other questions or anything, just reach out to me. Well,
I know where you live.
Work with you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks, Mary. Good night, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thanks, you too.